moving on to what else? Like, what is another use of the PCS? Is I guess a backup design, right? Because one of the things that most solar goers ask for is, hey, if the grid goes down, can I run my home on solar only or with a battery? And you guys enable that as well. Can we talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that as well?
Yeah, sure. So I'll talk a little bit about in general what can you back up
Hmm.
in terms of like the functionality of the system. So as mentioned earlier, the ELS5K is can back up 5 kilowatts of power. Technically 5,000 volt amps is what we say. But if it's perfect power factor, then it's 5 kilowatts.
Yeah.
So in general, we don't recommend backing up your entire home because for the most part, it usually exceeds 5 kilowatts. So what we
Hmm.
typically recommend is you put like essentials on the backup panel. So things like Wi-Fi, certain lights in your home, refrigerator, and things like that. And as long as the loads don't exceed 5 kilowatts, then you should be okay. So I wouldn't recommend doing two pole loads like AC or dryers or like large motors or things like that. But the main thing is to make sure that the load is 5,000. Another thing to note also is we can handle surge 7,500 for 10
Hmm.
seconds. So if there's anything that does kick that does that, our PCS is able to handle those types of systems. So those are the sort of things that you want to think about in terms of what you can back up. And the important number is 5 kilowatts.
Yeah.
One of the note also is that it is possible to parallelize these two batteries into, I'm sorry, to parallelize the ELS5K in two. So if you get 5 and 5, you can get a 10 kilowatt backup system if you wish. So that is
Got it.
one option that is available.
Got it. Can that be 15 or 20 too, or is the two the max
The
for that?
maximum is two at the present moment. Mhm.
Got it. Got it. So can we talk a little bit about like the I guess the design consideration for the backup piece and the full system and like when you are
For
because
the solar, right?
yeah, for the solar because let's say you have a need for a 10 to 15 kW system for your home, but you also want to have a backup. Like how would you design that? And would you be able to design the system so that if it's a 15 kW system, you can on a normal day make full use of it, but in a grid down scenario, use the 5 kW of that to run the house with the
Yeah,
battery.
sure. Let me bring up this diagram over here first.
Mhm.
And yeah, so the main question is basically it all boils down to how do you connect the solar? And as you've touched upon, one common question is will you be able to have solar when you have a grid outage?
Yeah.
I think definitely in the beginning of the solar industry, a lot of customers mistakenly think that if you have solar, and when you have a grid outage, then you must have power, right? Which
Right.
is unfortunately not the
Not
case, and that was definitely a lot of education we need to do in the industry. But
some AC/DC education, we call it, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of that also in batteries, because the answer is it is for if you have a battery system, it is possible to have solar in backup, and there's nuances in that. So I like to break down. So there's two ways they can connect solar, and I'll go over those options, the pros and cons, and we'll go from there. So as I mentioned, there are is an AC coupled solution. So you're going to be coupling it with a AC coupled solar inverter. There are two places they can connect. One is the backup panel, and that is basically shown in this section over here. So
Mhm.
if you connect the inverter to the backup panel in this configuration over here, when you have a grid outage, this section goes away, so it disappears and there's no voltage. But what happens is the PCS creates I call it microgrid, but sometimes that can be a little bit scary. But it produces 240 volt AC, and then it creates 120 as well, split phase.
Mhm.
And that basically provides the power for your backup loads. And as we know, inverters they are anti-islanding, so they will only produce power if it senses 240-volt AC on the AC side. So in this scenario over here, because there's AC present on the backup panel, these inverters will stay on and will continue to produce power into the PCS. So in this scenario you will have solar available during backup.
Yeah.
Now, this sounds great, but why don't you put all of your solar onto that section over here? So unfortunately, in this scenario, there are two downsides. One, at present moment, our current availability for that kind of connection is DS3s. If you're in the global market, DS3Ds, but in the
Yeah.
US, this feature is only available for DS3. So once again, when you have a grid outage, you can still have the DS3s continue to power your system. We're currently working on ways to see how to bring compatibility to other inverters, but at present moment, this is our current limitation.
Yeah.
So that's the first one. You can only put DS3s in this way. The second limitation is because the PCS or the ELS5K is the one that is processing the power, that nameplate power is going to be the limiting factor on how much solar they can put on the PCS. So it's a function of charge currents. So I'll say that for most systems in the United States that I've seen, it's usually two batteries and one ELS5K. If you have that scenario, then the maximum amount of solar they can put is 6,250 watts on the AC side, and that's how much you can put on the backup panel.
Got it.
So in any case, just to summarize, if you want to have solar on when you have a grid outage, connect it to the backup panel, but only DS3s, and there's a limited amount of power that you can put.
Got it.
So that's option number one. If you were to connect it to the main panel, however, if you do it this way, there's no limitation on how much solar you can put, and there's also no limitation on what brands of inverters that you can use. As long as it outputs AC, that's all that really matters. So the downside of this approach, though, is if you lose the grid, so you have a grid outage, the inverters will stop work just as much as the grid will stop working. Your backup loads will stay on, but you just won't be able to have solar to charge your system here.
So
When the
you'll
grid
be
is on,
so you would be running those backups, and in this picture you don't have a backup PV system either, so that you would
yes,
be running those from the battery only, right?
yes,
For a
exactly,
limited
that's
time.
correct.
Got it.
Yep, and if you are connected to the grid, and you're connected in this scenario, you will be able to use solar to power your backup loads, and it'll be able to use to charge the battery. So all that functionality will exist, whether you connect the main panel or the backup panel.
Got it.
So, but say for example, I'm just pulling a number from thin air, 20 kilowatts of solar in your system, and you want some of it in backup. You can do it in this way, where you basically take some of your array, put it into the backup panel, and put the rest onto the main panel in this formation seen over here.
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, when you are connected to the grid, and when the grid is normally working, you'll have the full might of your entire array powering your entire home, powering the backup loads, powering the grid loads, charging the batteries, and both arrays will be available all the time during when you're connected to the grid. The main nuance is what happens when you lose the grid, when you have a grid outage. And when that happens, the loads on your main panel will cease. And same thing with the inverters on the main panel. However, everything that still exists on the backup panel will continue to function, including the DS3s on your backup panel and the backup loads in the load center.
Got it. Very clear. Beautiful explanation of the three different ways of designing the AP storage, or the AP storage plus power conversion system solution. Thank you very much, Chris, for all this insight into your solution architecture and the storage offerings from AP Systems.
Yeah, absolutely. And more than happy to answer any further questions. Do you have any questions for us? We have our technical support, reach out to our sales and distribution, and we're more than happy to talk to you about our solution.
Is there an email alias viewers can email directly to reach the team, or?
I don't have a good answer for that. We have like an inquiry form on our website, and it's usually I think that goes to support.usa@apsystems.com. We also do have a technical phone line as well available. So I think those are probably good two options for inquiries.
Got it. Great. Well, thank you very much once again, and I hope to continue doing more of these sessions as you guys develop more and more features and functionality.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Karim, and talk to you in the future.
Thank you.